the language, all right. It's English.
The casting of The Exorcist is a story of a lead actor being signed, production moving ahead, and then a last-minute decision that changed everything. Back in the early 1970s, when The Exorcist was being assembled, the studios and the director were working under tremendous pressure on an already famous novel, a high-stakes budget, and a story that was pushing boundaries for its time. The studio had initially locked in Stacy Keach for the role of Father Karras, the Jesuit psychiatrist priest whose crisis of faith becomes a linchpin of the horror in The Exorcist.
Don't do that, sweetheart. It's dangerous.
No, wait. Well, go on.
Keach was a known actor, a solid professional with a growing reputation in Hollywood and stage circles. Under contract, his hiring seemed a safe and sensible choice, exactly the kind of decision studios loved. His presence promised security, a trained, charismatic performer capable of grounding a film that dealt with the unthinkable. But director William Friedkin had a different vision, one that would challenge this sense of safety. He wanted someone who could embody not just clerical authority, but haunted vulnerability. A man of faith wrestling with doubt, whose presence would carry more than just exposition. Friedkin wasn't looking for movie star confidence. He was chasing something more fragile, more inward, something that audiences might not even recognize consciously, but would feel deeply. Which brings us to Jason Miller. Miller was not yet part of Hollywood's machinery. He was a playwright and stage actor, not a cinematic star. He came from a world of theater where intensity and intimacy trumped screen polish. Friedkin spotted him after a performance of that championship season and thought, this is the kind of man who could bring internal conflict, authenticity, and subtle despair to a character who, in lesser hands, might come off as merely heroic.
And up in the branches of this cypress tree, there's Groper, the crazy bastard, talking in whispers with an owl.
With a what?
A big black and white owl. They're common. I couldn't testify to what they were saying. They were whispering, understand me?
In one telling anecdote, Miller called Friedkin and declared, I read that book, that Exorcist. That guy is me. It wasn't arrogance. It was recognition. Miller had studied for the priesthood before becoming a playwright, and he had first-hand understanding of what it meant to grapple with belief and despair. Friedkin initially resisted. The part was cast, the studio had paid contracts, and the machinery was in motion. Yet Miller's conviction impressed him. He agreed to a test. On a shoestring, Miller paid his way to Los Angeles, filmed a screen test with Ellen Burstyn, performing a scene where her daughter is possessed, and she tells Karras she believes her daughter is possessed. Then, a close-up of Miller saying Mass, as though for the first time, a simple shot, but layered with quiet reverence and uncertainty. What happened next is the heart of the story. After seeing the footage, Friedkin realized Miller had exactly the quality he needed. He described Miller's look as dark, good looks, haunted eyes, quiet intensity, and low, compassionate voice. The screen test captured something intangible. Not an actor playing a priest, but a man truly wrestling with his soul. It was exactly the kind of subdued, internalized performance Friedkin wanted.
May I call you Sir, Stacy Keach?
Please call me Stacy.
I have admired your performances, yea, these many years, but you're still a young man.
I hope so. In spirit.
So, Stacy Keach was effectively fired. Or more precisely, his contract was voided mid-pre-production. In effect, the star got cut out before filming proper, replaced by a relative unknown. Miller signed. Friedkin knew he needed someone who could bring nuance, fear, earnestness, and spiritual crisis, not a polished movie hero, but a deeply human man who doubts, even as he prays. And he found that in Miller, not Keach. Here's an example in this clip that illustrates the kind of gravitas Miller brought. And even though this is after filming, you can sense how the role demanded grounded sincerity. The scene where Father Karras meets Reagan's mother and quietly introduces himself in a very unceremonial fashion, showing just how unsure he too is about the whole situation, like a thoughtful priest should be at that moment.
Chris McNeil.
Please go away.
I'm Father Karras.
I'm very sorry. Hello.
That understated tension, the way Miller holds back, searching for words, became one of the defining traits of the performance. Audiences could feel his exhaustion, his quiet panic beneath the surface. Friedkin later said, Miller's authenticity made even the supernatural feel believable. The possession scenes had weight because they were countered by a priest who felt real. By contrast, consider if the original casting had held. The film might have tilted more toward a traditional hero-priest trope, especially because of the kind of aura Keach usually brings to his roles. Miller's internal conflicts made Karras real vulnerable, exhausted, touched by grief over his mother's death, doubting his vocation. His face seemed to carry the entire weight of guilt and faith simultaneously. The screenplay was even adjusted to mirror some of Miller's own background. Having studied for the priesthood and having experienced his own crisis of faith, Miller understood what it meant to question one's purpose. His performance during the scene where Father Karras shows up at Regan's mother's house, looking quietly torn at what he witnessed with the little girl, showed just how much of the depth of character Miller brought to the story.
Look, I'm only against the possibility of doing your daughter more harm than good.
Nothing you could do could make it any worse.
That moment isn't about the demon, it's about a man losing his anchor, about faith cracking under the weight of reason. Miller didn't just act it, he lived it on screen. That's what his performance imbued. It's what might not have come through if casting remained conventional. From a production standpoint, the switch was momentous. The director and studio were under deadlines, budget pressure, and the expectation of delivering a film that would honor the novel's success. Every week of delay cost thousands. Yet Friedkin's insistence on this change spoke volumes about his priorities: authenticity over safety, truth over spectacle. The film's realism, from its documentary-like lighting to its naturalistic dialogue, depended on performances that didn't feel performed. Miller's presence allowed Friedkin to keep that tone grounded, raw, and believable. Friedkin has said that the casting of Karras was particularly challenging because the studio wanted big names, recognizable faces that would sell tickets. Yet he felt the audience should not recognize the actor too strongly in order to surrender to the horror rather than the celebrity. By pulling out of Keach and firing or buying out his contract, Friedkin ran a significant risk. But the gamble paid off. Miller's portrayal became central to the film's enduring power, earning an Oscar nomination and anchoring one of the most influential horror films ever made.
I cast you out! Unclean spirit!
Shove it up your ass!
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ! It is he who commands you!
Let's take a quick look at the whole timeline. Keach is hired for Karras. Friedkin sees Miller's theater work. Though Keach is under contract, Miller insists on a screen test and arranges to pay his own way. Friedkin watches the footage, decides to replace Keach. The studio is forced to pay off the contract. Miller is cast, and production continues with him as Karras. And from the very first moment Miller was introduced as Father Karras, it was extremely obvious the studio had made the right choice. And it's no surprise the movie went on to be one of the most defining horror films of all time.
Look down in pity!
You killed your
On this
mother!
your servant!
You left her alone to
Regan
die!
to
Shut
his-
up! I'll never forgive you!
Oh, Lord,
Shut
this
up!
devil's-
Bastard! Oh!
I command you, by the judge of the living and the dead, to depart from the servant of God. It's the power.
If that moment had been delivered by a more conventional actor, the scene might have leaned harder into shock or charisma, rather than the subtle terror of a priest who fears his faith may fail him. The decision to recast mid-pre-production demonstrates how filmmakers sometimes need to make bold calls to elevate material, even when contracts, budgets, and plans resist change. Maybe we're probably asking what about Stacy Keach and how he felt about the whole setup. The fact is that he stayed professional and moved on. He later worked with the same writer-director pairing in William Peter Blatty's The Ninth Configuration, and continues a respected career.
Oh my God!
The fact that Keach was replaced is not framed as scandalous in the archive, rather as a creative decision made under pressure for the sake of the material. When a star or near star gets fired or replaced midway through filming, the narrative often presents it as chaos behind the scenes. But in this case, it was a deliberate director's choice to align casting with the tonal heart of the film. Without the switch, The Exorcist might still have been a successful film, but perhaps not the timeless, ground-shaking cultural landmark it became. In the scene where Father Karras sacrifices himself to save little Regan, we see the vision of the director and studio in full display.
Come into me! God damn you! Take me! Take me!
In this moment, you see Miller's full arc, fearful, doubtful, courageous, a performance that anchors horror in human frailty, not just demonic spectacle. His portrayal gave audiences something rare in horror, a hero who is fragile yet brave, torn between faith and despair. The fired star wasn't just substituted, the entire character's emotional architecture shifted, and the film's tone with it. The result is a horror classic that remains terrifying, profound, and deeply human, proof that sometimes the toughest creative gambles pay off forever.